Hello guys and welcome to another episode of By the Way Inglés. My name's Alistair and in today's video we're going to be looking at modal verbs. Gramática? Well, not exactly. Instead, I want to look at the historical background of the modal verbs in order to better explain some of their peculiar uses, especially in relation to Spanish. For example, yo sé tocar la guitarra. Why is that I can play the guitar in English? Or another example, when looking at a menu, in Spanish you could say, yo quiero la margarita. Whereas in English, we'll often say, I'll have the margarita, please. Yo tendré la margarita. Well, if you're interested in finding out more, stick around for this week's episode of By the Way Inglés. And remember that the vocabulary for the video is down in the description. So today we're looking at modal verbs, but let's first very quickly remind ourselves what the modal verbs actually are. I'm not going to go into so much detail here, so if you feel like you need to brush up on your auxiliaries and modals, then I can recommend the By the Way Inglés Instagram account, where I am now posting grammatically related content to complement the apparent lack of it on this channel. Okay, so the modal verbs are a subcategory of the auxiliary verbs. There are the primary auxiliaries, be, have, and do. The modal auxiliaries, the ones that we will be looking at today, can, could, may, might, will, would, shall, should, and must. And there are also the quasi-modals, ought to, had better, dare, and need. But let's not overcomplicate things, so ciao. What distinguishes the modal verbs from the primary auxiliaries is that they are defective, in the sense that their conjugation is incomplete. There is no future, gerund, participle, or infinitive form for any of these verbs. It is also said that they don't conjugate, given that the third person singular has no final S. You can't say, he cans do it. It is also said that there is no past tense either. Why the modal verbs don't have the final S for the third person singular is that a long time ago, in the early stages of Proto-Germanic, there existed the perfect tense similar to what Latin had. This was also similar to the perfect tense in English we have today, where there is both a present and past element to it. I have seen her 3 times today, la he visto 3 veces hoy, and I have worked here for 5 years, trabajo aquí desde hace 5 años. Over time, both in the Romance and Germanic languages, this perfect tense became the past simple. The exception was with what would become the modal verbs in the Germanic languages, where it became the present tense. That a in shall, may, and can is the same tense marker that you find in the past simple tense form of ran, drank, sang, and swam. For the same reason that we don't say she sangs or he dranks, we don't say he cans or she mays. As for that supposed lack of past tense, well, we're about to see that that is not strictly true, with our first pair of modal verbs, can and could. So, can and could. They are the present and past conjugations of the Old English verb kunnan, which meant to know in the sense of acquired knowledge. What happened was that there was a semantic shift, starting around 1300, from the meaning of knowing to the meaning of being able to do something. But it is this original meaning of knowing which we can still see when we say, I can play the guitar, for sé tocar la guitarra. And if you're wondering at this point how we say puedo tocar la guitarra, it's also I can play the guitar, and it's often the context which differentiates the two meanings. It's also worth mentioning 3 adjective derivatives of kunnan and its participle form, kuth, which reveal this old meaning of knowing. First, there is cunning, which means astuto or ingenioso. For example, we have the expression to be as cunning as a fox, astuto como un zorro. Then there's the negative form of the participle, uncouth, which means grosero or ignorante. So if can originally meant to know, what did English used to use for poder? Well, the answer might surprise you. Ha ha ha. It's may and might, the present and past tense of the Old English verb magen, which meant poder or to be able to. And still, to this day, the noun might and the adjective mighty mean poder and poderoso, respectively, as in the mighty Roman Empire fell to the might of the barbarian tribes. This older meaning might be the reason why, when asking for permission, may is seen as more polite than can. Can technically being your personal capacity or knowledge to do something, while may is whether it's more generally possible. And we can see this oh so irritating distinction every child, at least in British schools, has to experience with a teacher at some point. Miss, can I go to the toilet? Yes, you can go to the toilet, but may you? Miss, may I go to the toilet? Yes, you may, Alistair. Even though these verbs are originally the past and present form of the old verb magen, nowadays the distinction between the two tenses has been sort of relegated to may sounds more certain than might. And when asking for permission, might sounds excessively formal. Might I have a cup of tea? Might one remove the stick from one's own arse? However, when you may want to use may or might in a sentence, could be with puede ser una buena idea. It may be a good idea. Or puede que llueva más tarde. It might rain later. Next, there's must, and there's not all that much to say about must, other than it started its life off as the past subjunctive of the Old English verb motan, meaning deber, or to have to, and slowly replaced the present tense as it was custom to use the past subjunctive to sound more polite. A little like quisiera is used in Spanish today. And next, there's will and would, the present and past tense of the Old English verb willa. And, interestingly, it is the non-modal version of will which reveals its original meaning nice and clearly, to will, which is basically just a fancy way to say querer. And it is a cognate, or cousin word of vouler, vouloir, and volere. Take the Crusader motto, for example. Deus vult, Dios lo quiere. In English, God wills it. Then there's the Muslim phrase, Insha'Allah, si Dios lo quiere, which is where you get ojalá from, and in English it's translated to God willing. And finally, el testamento, or el testamento de la voluntad, in English is simply known as your will. So, when we consider the original meaning of will as want, sentences such as I'll have the margarita make a lot more sense. Or other examples when we make instantaneous decisions in English. Ah, vas por ahí? Pues voy contigo. Ah, you're going this way? I'll go with you. These sentences all make a little bit more sense when we think of will as querer. And to our final pair, we have shall and should. The old present and past tense of shall, which meant to owe or to have to do something. Now, I don't really have anything interesting to say about should. It just means debería and, on occasion, debo or deberé. But shall, on the other hand, has a curious similarity to the Spanish future tense. It starts with the fact that shall was used alongside will for the future tense in English since, well, forever, where there was a distinction that if you were going to do something that was an obligation and there was no desire involved, for example, te pagaré mañana, then shall was to be used. And if it were something that you wanted to do, like te veré mañana, then it was to be I will see you tomorrow. This meant that the translation of the Sixth Commandment, no matarás, became you shall not kill, literally meaning no debes matar. The interesting similarity appears when we look at where the future tense comes from in Spanish and all of the other Western Romance languages. Latin had a simple future tense, which for an are verb like amare was amabo. But Latin also had two other ways of forming this future tense, which is frankly just overkill. But then Vulgar Latin came along and spotted a way it could make everything much easier. There already existed the structure amare habeo, to express that has de amar, tienes que amar. So why not just consider that needing to do something meant that you were going to do it? Over time, this became the standard way of expressing the future in Vulgar Latin. But the simplification was not over yet. I'm sure it will be of no surprise to you that habeo is from the verb habere, which gave the Spanish verb haber. And what happens when you conjugate the verb haber after a verb? Amar e, amarás, amará, amaremos, amarabéis, amaréis, and amarán. So there you have it. Matarás and you shall not kill both start as an obligation and end up as future tenses. And that's it for today. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. However, if you are even more confused about the more conventional uses of the modal verbs, then I might suggest that, once again, you check out the By the Way Ingles's Instagram account for grammar tips and the common mistakes to avoid for Spanish speakers. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below and I'll respond, and don't forget to like and share. Anyway, that's been my By the Way for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.